In 1914, Ernest Shackleton aimed at the impossible. He wanted to cross Antarctica, not sail around it. Cross it, straight through the coldest place on Earth. That sounds reckless. It was reckless, and that was kind of the point. At the time, Antarctica was still a blank space to most people. No roads, no rescue teams, no warm base nearby. Just ice, wind, and months of darkness. Shackleton knew the risk. Everyone did. A lot of men would have backed out right there. He didn't. He went to London and started building a team. He needed sailors, scientists, mechanics, men who could work, freeze, and keep going. He did not want cowards. He wanted people who would not panic when things got ugly. And people answered. That says a lot about Shackleton. He had this strange pull. He was not the richest guy in the room. He was not the most famous either. But he made people believe the mission was bigger than fear. Then came the ship. Endurance. Even the name sounded like a warning. She was built for the ice. Thick wood, strong frame. A ship made to push forward when common sense said stop. Shackleton loaded her with supplies, instruments, food, fuel, and hope. A lot of hope. By the time they were ready, London was buzzing with the usual mix of respect and doubt. Some people saw courage. Others saw madness. Crossing Antarctica sounded like a stunt that could turn into a funeral. Shackleton saw it differently. To him, this was the last big prize. The kind of thing people remembered. The kind of thing that put your name in history books forever. On the day of departure, the harbor was packed. Men on deck, crates stacked high, ropes tight, steam rising, the city watching as Endurance pulled away from port. And for a moment, it must have felt perfect. That matters, because this story starts with confidence, with a plan, with a clean map and a clear target. They were not leaving to survive. They were leaving to win. That is the first mistake most people make. They think the story is about bravery. It isn't. It's about what happens when bravery meets reality. Because Antarctica does not care about plans. It does not care about medals. It does not care how smart you are, or how famous your name sounds. The ice is the boss, and very soon, Shackleton's crew would learn that the hard way. They were about to face storms that could shred sails, cold that could bite through layers, ice packs that move like a living thing. And once the ship got trapped, there would be no easy way out. That is where the real story begins. Not with the departure, with the moment the ice stopped them cold. Because once Endurance left the harbor, there was no turning back. No spare ship waiting behind them. No safety net. Just a crew betting everything on one dangerous idea. Shackleton wanted to cross Antarctica in one piece. Instead, Antarctica was getting ready to test whether any of them would make it home at all. The ice got thicker every day, and the crew knew it. At first, they thought they could force their way through. A few hard pushes, a clean line north. Then they kept hitting more ice. Then even more. This was never going to be simple. Not here, not in Antarctica. The sea was already starting to freeze around the Endurance. Night by night, the ship lost room to move. Day by day, the ice closed in harder. The crew kept working. They watched the water. They watched the cracks. They waited for an opening. When one appeared, they tried to drive the ship forward. It failed. They tried again. Same result. The Endurance moved a little, then stopped. The ice held it like a hand. And then the hand closed. The ship became trapped. Not for an hour. Not for a day. For weeks. Then months. That is the part people miss. Ice does not have to smash you right away. It can just wait. It can keep building pressure while you sit there, thinking the next shift might save you. The crew kept hoping the sea would break free. It did not. The cold kept working. Every day, the ice around the ship grew harder. Every night, it locked tighter. The Endurance sat there with no way out, stuck in a moving field that never slept. And the ice was not still. It drifted, it pushed, it shifted under the ship and around it. Thousands of tons moved with slow, brutal force. The wooden hull started taking hits from every side. You could hear it before you can see it. A deep groan, a sharp crack, then another one. Boards split, planks strained, the frame twisted. The men were out on the ice now, watching their ship from a distance. That had to feel wrong. A ship is supposed to be the thing that saves you. Here, it was the thing that was failing first. They had brought food, gear, hope. None of that mattered much now. They were living on a frozen field, staring at the vessel that was supposed to carry them home. Some of them still believed the ice would open. That was the dangerous part. Hope can make you wait too long. It can make you think tomorrow will be different just because today was bad. But Antarctica did not care about tomorrow. The pressure kept rising. The hull creaked louder. The ship leaned. Every new sound meant more damage. Every silence meant the ice was tightening again. They started to understand the real threat. It was not just being stuck. It was being crushed slowly, with enough time to hear it happen. And there was nothing they could do. No engine could fight that kind of force. No crew could wrestle a continent. The Endurance was finished the moment the ice decided to keep hold of it. The men stood in that white silence and watched their ship groan under the pressure. They could feel the cold, the waiting, the fear, and slowly, one terrible truth set in. The ice was winning. As the Endurance approached Antarctica, the crew encountered thicker and thicker ice. Then it happened. The ship started giving way. Not fast, worse than fast. Slow enough for everyone to hear it coming. The ice had been pressing on the hull for months, day after day, night after night. The wood groaned first. Then it cracked. Then it sounded like something alive trying to get out. This was the Endurance, and now it was losing. The crew were still trying to pretend it might hold. Men kept checking ropes. Men kept moving gear. Men kept looking at Shackleton for a face that said, maybe we still have time. They didn't. The pressure kept climbing. The hull bent under it. Beams snapped inside the frame. One part of the ship would rise, then slam down again as the ice shifted. Every hit sent another jolt through the deck. You could hear it. Timber exploding, metal screaming, wood splitting open like dry bone. And then came the order. Abandon ship. Not later, not after one more hour, not after one more meal. Right now. That was the moment everything changed. Not because the ship was sinking. They already knew that. It changed because the ship was their shelter, their storage, their base, their only barrier between life and the polar night. Now it was just dead weight. So they moved. They grabbed what they could carry: blankets, food, tools, sleeping bags, the things that might keep them alive for another day. Everything else stayed behind: boxes, records, personal gear, the small stuff that mattered to them, left there with the ship. No one complained, not out loud. They stepped off the Endurance and onto the ice. That sounds simple. It wasn't. The ice was uneven. It shifted under their boots. The wind hit harder the second they left the ship. There was no wall now, no roof, no fire built into the ship's belly, just cold air and darkness. They stood there in the open, staring at the thing they had called home. Around them was the Weddell Sea, frozen solid and endless. Above them, a black sky. No soft winter night, no peaceful snowfield. Just a brutal place that had already taken their ship and was still not finished. Shackleton kept them moving. He had to. If they stopped, panic would spread. If panic spread, the whole group could fall apart right there on the ice. So he gave them work: set up camp, sort the supplies, count the food, mark the tents, build a routine before fear could build one for them. But everyone kept looking back, because the Endurance was still there. For a little while, anyway, it sat trapped in the ice, tilted and broken, like it was waiting for the final blow. The lights were gone. The warmth was gone. The life was going out of it, piece by piece. Then the ship leaned harder. More wood burst. More ice crushed in. And finally, the Endurance started to sink. Not into water they could see, into the frozen wreckage below. Nobody cheered. Nobody spoke. They just watched. The ship that had carried them across the world was disappearing under the ice in front of them. Their home was gone. Their mission was over. The maps, the plans, the pride, the hope of an easy return. All of it was buried with the ship. What stayed was the cold, the dark, and the men standing on the ice with nowhere to go. That was the real disaster, because now they were no longer sailors on a voyage. They were stranded men on drifting ice. And the worst part was this: the ship dying was only the beginning. They were living on ice. Not land, ice. And it kept moving under them. No rescue was coming, no radio, no map that could save them now. They were cut off, and the cold did not care. Every morning started the same way. Check the tents, check the sleds, check the ice, then check the ice again, because it could split without warning. Food was tight from the start. Every bite mattered. Every animal they had killed had to last. Every mistake showed up fast when the temperature dropped. And the temperature was brutal. The kind that burns your face before you even feel it. The kind that makes your fingers stop working while they are still in your gloves. The men pulled sleds across the ice for miles. Heavy sleds, awkward sleds, sleds packed with gear, supplies, and whatever they needed to stay alive one more day. Then the wind came back. Not a quick gust, hours of it, days of it. Wind that shoved at the tents and filled the air with snow so thick they could barely see each other. At night, they slept inside those tents, listening to the canvas snap, listening to the ice groan below them, listening for the sound nobody wanted to hear. A crack. Because a crack could mean the ice was shifting. It could mean water. It could mean losing supplies. It could mean the end of the whole thing. And the worst part was this: they were not standing still. They were drifting. Their camp was on a moving sheet of ice, carried across the frozen ocean like a broken raft. They did not control where they went. They just tried to survive the ride. Weeks passed, then months, then more months. Most survival stories do not go this far. Most break in a few days or a few weeks. This one kept going. The crew lived through polar night, where the sun was gone for long stretches. No warmth, no easy markers of time, just endless dark, wind, and the same cold routine. That is where morale starts to break. Not from one huge disaster, from tiny ones. A wet sock, a frozen glove, a meal that is smaller than yesterday, a fight over nothing, a body that is getting weaker every day. Shackleton knew that. He knew the enemy was not only the ice, it was despair. Once a man stops believing, he stops fighting. And once that happens, the cold finishes the job. So, he kept people busy. He kept them moving. He watched their moods as closely as he watched the weather. If someone was slipping, he noticed. If someone was angry, he handled it. If someone needed a joke, he gave one. Not because he was cheerful, because he understood the math of survival. A tired crew can still work. A hopeless crew cannot. The ice kept cracking. The storms kept coming. The camp kept drifting. And still, Shackleton made sure the men had structure. Simple tasks, clear orders, something to do besides stare at the cold and think about death. There were days when the sky and the sea looked the same. Days when the whole world felt white and empty. Days when a man could stand outside for a minute and come back changed. And yet, they held on. Not because the situation got easier. It got worse. Not because the weather improved. It did not. Not because rescue appeared. It never did. They held on because the leader refused to let the expedition become a funeral. That mattered more than blankets, more than food, more than luck. Because once hope goes, the body follows. And Shackleton knew it. That was the real job on the ice. Not just to find food, not just to survive the storms, to keep the crew believing that tomorrow still existed. Because if hope died out there, on that drifting ice, the expedition was already over. The ice was breaking up, and that changed everything. For months, they had waited on that frozen ship. Now, the pack was splitting apart under them. So Shackleton made the call. Get the lifeboats ready. That sounds simple. It was not simple. They were heading into the Southern Ocean. People called it the roughest water on Earth. Storms came fast. Waves hit like walls. The cold got into everything. Hands, boots, ropes, food, sleep. Nothing stayed dry. The first launch was chaos. Men pulled hard at frozen lines. Water smashed over the sides. The boats felt tiny. Not brave, just tiny. One wrong wave could flip the whole thing. And out there, no one was coming to help. They kept moving anyway. Day after day, the crew fought the sea. They bailed water non-stop. They lashed gear down with numb fingers. They tried to eat while the boats bucked under them. The wind never seemed to stop. The ocean never gave them a break. And then came the island. It was small, cold, barely there. But to them, it meant one thing: land. They had made it alive. That should have been the end of the nightmare. It was not even close. Because the island was empty. No harbor, no doctor, no rescue ship, just rock, ice, and dead silence. The men were stranded again. Only now, they had a worse problem. They were farther from help than before. They had survived the crossing, but survival was not enough. Shackleton looked at the map. He knew what it meant. The only way to save the others was to go again. So he chose 3 men and 1 boat, the James Caird. It was a tiny lifeboat, built for short trips, not for the world's worst sea. They packed it as tight as they could. Supplies, water, a compass, a few tools, some food. Barely enough for hope. Their target was over 1,300 kilometers away. That is not a typo. More than 1,300 kilometers of open ocean. No modern GPS. No weather report. No rescue radio. Just a small boat, a compass, and a line on a map. Most people would call that suicide. Maybe they were right. The moment they left shore, the ocean tried to kill them. The waves climbed over the boat. Salt water froze on the deck. The men sat soaked through, shivering so hard they could barely hold on. One wrong turn, and they would vanish into the dark water without a trace. Shackleton did not let them drift. He watched the sky. He watched the swell. He watched the stars when he could. Every choice mattered. Every mile mattered. One bad angle could send them off course for days, and if they missed their target, there would be nothing left. Hours turned into days. Days turned into more days. They slept in short bursts, if they slept at all. They woke to water in the boat. They woke to cold that hurt their faces. They woke to the same ocean, still endless, still violent, still waiting. This is the part people miss. They were not fighting for glory. They were fighting for the men left behind, for every crew member still trapped in the cold, for the promise Shackleton had made when this whole disaster began. He had said he would bring everyone home. Now that promise was riding on a boat, smaller than a city bus. At one point, the weather turned so bad they could barely see the mast in front of them. The boat climbed one wave, dropped into black water, then climbed again. Over and over, the men held on with hands that had stopped feeling like hands. And still, they pushed forward. Because stopping was worse. Because behind them was a frozen island and a broken expedition. And ahead was the only chance any of them had. After nearly 2 weeks on the open sea, the James Caird finally found its way to South Georgia. Not by luck, by grit, by skill, by a kind of stubbornness that sounds impossible until you see what people can do when there is no other choice. But even then, the mission was not over. Shackleton still had to cross the island itself, on foot, through mountains, over ice, in conditions no one had mapped properly. He and 2 men kept going until they reached help. And when help finally came, he turned it back toward the men he had left behind. That was the real victory. Not the boat, not the crossing, the fact that he went back. Because in the end, the impossible journey was not about reaching land. It was about refusing to leave people behind. They were this close to losing everything. The ice had them pinned. The cold had months to win. And still, Shackleton kept moving. By the time he reached help, the story should have been over. Most men would have called that a miracle and stopped there. But the job was not done. Not even close. His crew was still out there, still trapped, still waiting under a sky that never seemed to change. 3 rescue attempts failed, one after another. The sea ice shut every route down. Ships turned back. Weeks slipped by. Then, more weeks. The pressure kept building. If the weather turned worse, The men could be lost for good. And that was the brutal part. Shackleton was not arriving in triumph. He was arriving in a race against time. He had already crossed open water in a tiny boat. He had already trusted wind, luck, and pure nerve just to reach help. Now he had to do the harder thing. He had to go back. So he kept pushing. He found another ship, then another plan, then another dead end. Antarctic ice does not care about hope. It does not care about good intentions. It just holds, and for months it held. Then came the break. A rescue ship fought through the fog and ice. Slow, careful, relentless. The crew on shore sighed first. At first, it looked like another threat, another shape in the white, another false alarm. Then they understood. It was real. The ship kept coming. The men started running, not because they needed to, because they could not stand still. After so long with no way out, after so many nights wondering if this was the end, they were finally seeing a path home. And Shackleton was back. Think about that moment. He had left them behind to find rescue. Now he was returning to bring them out. No speeches, no grand victory parade, just a ship in the ice and a group of men who had survived the impossible. After nearly 2 years in isolation, every single crew member made it out alive. Not one man was lost. That is the part that still hits hard. The expedition failed in its original mission. They never made the crossing they set out to complete. The ship Endurance was crushed and trapped beneath the ice. The dream died out there, but the men did not. And that changed the whole meaning of the story. Because Shackleton's greatest success was not reaching Antarctica. It was bringing everyone back. He kept his crew alive through hunger, cold, fear, and failure. When everything broke, he did not break with it. That is why people still study this story today. Not because it was clean, not because it worked out the way they planned, but because it showed what leadership looks like when nothing is going right. You do not quit, you do not vanish, you keep looking for one more way. Today, the wreck of Endurance rests beneath Antarctic waters, deep below the ice, silent now. A reminder of how small people are there and how strong they can still be. Because the ship was lost, the mission was lost, but the crew survived. That is the real ending. So here's the question. If you were there, cut off for months, with rescue failing again and again, would you still believe you were getting home? And if you want more true stories like this, subscribe to the Hidden Archives. After nearly 2 years of isolation, every single crew member made it out alive. Not one man was lost. That is the part that still hits hard. The expedition failed in its original mission. They never made the crossing they set out to complete. The ship Endurance was crushed and trapped beneath the ice. The dream died out there, but the men did not. And that changed the whole meaning of the story. Because Shackleton's greatest success was not reaching Antarctica, it was bringing everyone back. He kept his crew alive through hunger, cold, fear, and failure. When everything broke, he did not break with it. That is why people still study this story today. Not because it worked out the way they planned, but because it showed what leadership looks like when nothing is going right. You do not quit. You do not vanish. You keep looking for one more way. Today, the wreck of Endurance rests beneath Antarctic waters, deep below the ice, silent now. A reminder of how small people are there and how strong they can still be. Because the ship was lost, the mission was lost, but the crew survived. That is the real ending. So here's the question. If you were there, cut off for months, with rescue failing again and again, would you still believe you were getting home? And if you want more true stories like this, subscribe to the Hidden Archives.